Okay, so the struts next. I've already shown you. There's a video. You can look in the back catalog and showing you how to replace the struts. But essentially, it's just the two bolts and the nuts here. Do not reuse the nuts. The manual says the bolts apparently you can reuse. Just remove the wheel speed sensor. Just a little clamp. Little 12mm headed bolt here for the brake line. Just remove it. And yeah, these are not cooperating, so I'm just going to cut these off because I'm going to replace them with the new struts, the links. And up top, just index the plate here so it'll go back in the same spot. Just a matter of replacing the rod end nut here, and the plate will be removed, and the whole strut should drop out. So once the bolts are out, as you can see, they came out actually not too bad, so lucky. Just make sure that you're ready. Don't let this unload and flop forward, but of course the control arm is there, as is the tie rod. Just support it as you actually pry it free, and as you can see, the whole strut is free here now. Just a matter of undoing the nut here that's on the mount. Hold it internally with a 6mm Allen key, and if you have an offset wrench, ideally 17mm for the nylock nut that's on top of the rod end. Go ahead. Oh,
okay.
Yeah. There you go.
There we go. Much better. There we go. There we are. Yeah, it's a little extra.
So I'm just back at it here, guys. I've got both the struts removed. So I'm just going to go about, removing the coil, transferring it over to the new struts, and bits and pieces transferred over. I've already done a video on the struts. I'll put a link in the bottom in the video description, so you can take a look at it in more detail. There's no point in really repeating myself, but I'll maybe show you a few points of interest along the way. So not as fancy as Suzuki's tooling here, guys, but I've got my Widowmakers on here in order to compress the spring, take the tension off the rod end and the shock itself within the strut, and so I can undo the nut here, right? Just take a measurement of the distance of the nut, just how deep it is on the threaded portion of the rod, and we'll be able to disassemble it without this exploding in our face, hopefully. So as the manual illustrates there, guys, you'll need a 6mm. You hold the inside of the rod Allen, and a 19mm, preferably offset, as it's sunken a wee bit into the mount, and just spin the nut off. Once it's all unloaded, of course, so the spring is compressed here. Don't know, I can't do it with one hand, but I can rotate the spring, so I know, on the saddle I mean, so I know it's all unloaded. Sometimes you can't win for losing, huh? So I never noticed on the removal of this, but on closer inspection, you can see the spring is obviously broken, right? So this threw a wrench in it that works for me, because I had already ordered the strut, the damper portion of the strut, as you can see there. So you cannot buy the springs for the SX4 on the aftermarket, as far as I can tell, just the springs. Perhaps I'm mistaken, but I checked a bunch of websites. I called a number of local places. They couldn't find a listing anywhere, so at least I couldn't get the springs, let's put it that way. So I had no option but to actually buy the springs from Suzuki. Yeah, there is still places in Canada that will sell you Suzuki genuine parts, right? Mitsubishi spring apparently, but there's lots of Mitsubishi parts in the SX4. So faced with the expense of returning the dampers and then buying the ready strut, it was changing 4 quarters for $1 type thing, so I decided just to go buy the spring, right? So that threw a wee bit of a wrench in it, works, but we'll carry on. We'll be replacing both springs. I could have cheaped out and replaced just the one, I suppose. It's always best practice to replace parts in pairs, you know, springs, dampers when it comes to suspension. But anyway, we'll carry on. A couple of new springs. So some of you guys have asked me about Suzuki genuine parts in the past. In Canada and the States, it's becoming quite tricky to be able to get Suzuki parts. My buddy Danny works for Nissan in Brampton, just south of my location here. He has agreed to put his card in the video. He'll take your calls. If you need some Suzuki parts, he can get them for you. He can maybe even ship them to you. Danny's a good guy.
a good pal of mine. Do not waste his time. Don't ask him for part numbers and then go buy it somewhere else. If you're going to buy it, contact him. He might be able to help you.
So it's been my experience, guys, that the KYB struts and dampers are really closely resemble the original equipment. This is the right hand strut. That's the right hand part number. Left hand in there still. Left hand. So with the spring held in my vise here, guys, just to keep it stable, you can see the spring is actually seated against the stop in the lower seat, and the new boot is in place. It looks a wee bit different. Just follow the instructions that come with the product. It tells you how to orient things. And yeah, I've got just enough thread here that I can put the upper spring seat in position. Just got some anti-corrosive on here. It's quite heavily corroded. I've scraped it, but still sound, I think. I hope. And the bearing goes in position, and of course the so it kind of stacks like this. I'll show you on the drawing, and then the new nut goes on top. Yeah, makes sense. I'll show it to you on the drawing. But a couple of points of interest here. One was make sure the spring is oriented correctly there. Mark everything if you're going to reuse it. It makes things easier for where you put it back, right? But since this is a new spring, use the inside the upper spring seat. There's the rubber cushion. They're rubber isolator. There isn't one for the bottom, by the way, as far as I can tell. And you can see here where the spring actually sits. Now keep in mind, this is not symmetrical. This is actually, you can see the cant to it there. So it's important that this is oriented correctly. Just use the depression in the cushion. You'll get it to drop down. You'll feel it. I can't really show it to you, but you'll feel it. So here's the strut assembled, guys. Precariously balanced on the workbench here, just so you can see it in the correct orientation. And again, here the focus is on the stack itself. Again, the original bump stop and the boot a wee bit different. So this configuration looks a wee bit different, but it's assembled as per the instructions. And the important part is the stack, right? The ring cushion ring, the upper seat, the bearing, it needs to be oriented correctly. It's obvious which way it goes. It slips down into the upper seat, and then the rubber mount itself, then the nut, and of course the plate and the nut is to be assembled as is on the car itself, right? And that's what it looks like. Just make sure everything is oriented correctly. Here's the torque spec, although you're going to need a pretty fancy in order to be able to hold the rod end here and actually be able to put your torque wrench on it. You're going to need a pretty low profile and slim crow's foot to get on it. I'll be honest, I just held it and torqued it up with my 17mm offset spanner there, to be honest. Don't reuse the nut that goes on the end of the rod end. Surprisingly, there's no washer between the rubber mount here and the nut. It's a nylock nut. Do not reuse it. A new nut comes with the damper. I've had these cars a lot longer than I ever anticipated, guys. You might thank yourself later if you just anti-seize the shank on the bolts. We've got a thread locker, entirely up to you. New nuts are required as per the manual here. As you can see, you can reuse the bolts. The installation consists of the two bolts, the nuts, of course. This is the forward orientation, so the nuts should be on the aft side. The strut itself, we'll put on a new vertical link shortly, and there's the brake line to be secured, the wheel speed sensor, and on the top here we have the mounting plate and the strut nut. So pretty much fully assembled here, guys. The bolts and the nuts, again, the nuts on the back side to 101.5 foot-pounds, 102. One thing I can mention here, don't ask me how I know this, make sure when you drop the strut in that you have the wheel speed sensor harness on the right side, which is the forward side of the installation. Otherwise you'll trap it behind and then you have to take your nuts off and, you know, the usual nonsense. Make sure you secure the brake line with no twist in it, of course. The dog bone here, the nuts are torqued to 32.5 foot-pounds if you're very particular about things. And yeah, on the top side, The nut, again, index this, so the plate will be in same orientation as it came off. You might want to put your floor jack underneath. I still have my brake on here, as you can see, obviously. I just lifted it with a floor jack just so that you can actually have the rod end, the threaded end of the rod end up, so you can put on the strut nut. And it's also torqued to, I don't know, I haven't done that yet, to be honest. See, it is torqued to 36.5 foot-pounds, 37 foot-pounds. Okay, rinse and repeat on the other side. I noticed in playback here, guys, I mentioned that make sure you have the harness on the right side, and that would be the right side for the right side of the car. What I should have said is the correct side, the forward side for the harness, just so it's not on this side and you have to undo everything. So I'll do the other side, and then I guess I'll show you the car when it's buttoned up, all the plastic is back in place and whatnot, and the car's going to go to the alignment shop, as I've mentioned multiple times. It's booked for an appointment. What to mention, I actually slacked the lower control arm bolts, and once the car was back on the ground, retorqued them. My pal Dave made a video of that a couple of times over, I think. It makes good sense, and one of the fellas actually mentioned in the comments about it, so yeah, I did actually do that once the car was back on the ground. 69 foot-pounds on the bolts. That's it. Everything buttoned up. Nothing left to do but take it for a wee test drive. As I said, it's scheduled for alignment tomorrow, so hopefully all's well. That's it, boys. Cheers.